You're listening to a special edition of We Get Work, recorded live from Workplace Horizons 2025 in New York City, Jackson Lewis's annual labor and employment law conference. Over 500 representatives from 260 companies gathered together to share valuable insights and best practices on workplace law issues impacting their business today. Here's your personal invitation to get the insights from the conference delivered directly to you. We'll see you in 2026. Here we are, and welcome to Live from Workplace Horizons, our We Get Work podcast studio here at the Hilton Midtown in New York City. I'd like to welcome Kelly Thomas, principal in the Baltimore office of Jackson Lewis, and Rich Greenberg, principal in the New York City office of Jackson Lewis. I wanted to start by asking you a pretty simple question. Tell us a little bit about your practice and really what employers are asking you here in 2025 after a pretty interesting few months. Kelly.
That is an understatement. Yes. Yes, as you said, I'm Kelly Thomas. I'm the co-lead of our employee benefits practice, which is our national advice and counsel practice in the benefits space. We also work closely with our ERISA litigation practice when it comes to litigation avoidance strategies. So we cover all things health and welfare, retirement plan, compensation, and tax. I'd say, we're getting a lot of questions right now from employers. What do we do? We're hearing a lot of headlines about new regulations, a lot of lawsuits in the fiduciary space for both health and welfare plans and retirement plans. And I think there's a lot of uncertainty out there, but I also think there's a lot of opportunity. So that's much of what we're talking with the clients about.
That's great. Rich.
What we're continuing to talk about clients on is day-to-day compliance issues. There's a little bit more reaction to what's been occurring on the federal level and then the state responses to that. The hardest thing we're dealing with now is trying to predict the future. There's the one thing that we've learned in the last 100 days is that the future is fully unpredictable, which creates loads of conflicts for clients on planning, on budgeting, and deciding what programs to implement. So we're doing our best with clients to try and be proactive, to try and help them take a step back and think about underlying fundamental principles on their compliance programs.
So the title of your presentation was How to Be a Multi-State Employer. And I think that's a question that is never going to go out of style, right? So Kelly, tell us a little bit about your presentation and what you covered from the benefits perspective, because as Rich and you just shared, there are a lot of issues to discuss.
Absolutely. And the thing about benefits is we often think of it as really governed at the federal level, whether we're talking about ERISA or the tax code. But there are state level considerations for employers with benefits. Sometimes it's benefits that aren't subject to ERISA, so state contract law might apply. That would be things like bonus plans, cash bonus plans. You also may see equity plans that are governed by federal and state securities laws. But even the ERISA plans, there's a whole host of activity right now in the pharmacy benefit management space, which we represent plan sponsors. And you might think, well, how does that affect them? But there are obligations created in some state laws that can affect certainly our fully insured plans and even self-insured plans too, which is unexpected and not what employers are used to seeing. So we have a lot of conversations about that. And really one of the highlights and what I was trying to get through in the presentation was just to simply inventory your benefits and to think about them from both the typical federal level, but also, state considerations as well.
And Rich, from the multi-state advice and counsel component, what did you share? What did you talk about today?
We really talked about 3 or 4 fundamental issues. First, if you're going to begin operations in a state, what are the major things that you should become aware of, that you should evaluate, that you should determine to ensure, that you should evaluate, determine whether or not you can comply with that, whether you want to take the business judgment, whether you want to make the business risk. Then we talked about how so many issues may be covered by existing policies or national programs, and that you can't look at everything in a vacuum. And that none of this is really rocket science. It's all about acquiring knowledge so you can make reasoned risk assessments, because perfection may not be possible. However, it's balancing risks and knowledge. And then we talked about how just because you decided you audited things in 2023, that you can't say, oh, we're good, we don't need to worry about it again. And we use the example of the changes in the federal government's position, and we went through some slides on developing state laws in different areas throughout the employment life cycle, just to show the need to be constantly vigilant in these areas so you are aware of risks, you can determine whether you want to implement national programs, and you can determine what policies may need to be modified and what issues people need to be aware of.
So these words came up a lot in our discussions today here in the studio: proactivity, policies, and patience. Would you apply some of those same words in your discussions with employers now?
I could not say that more eloquently, Alicia. Being proactive and knowing what the rules of the road are is absolutely necessary for decision making. I look at my practice, and we actually made this analogy during our speech, as a proactive practice, as opposed to litigation, which is a reactive practice. In litigation, you're defending anything. You're saying that's not a legal claim. My job is to assist clients in having information and helping them to avoid risk. Avoid risk doesn't always mean doing everything perfectly. You may not always be able to do everything perfectly, but knowing what risk you may be taking so that if an employee, a third party raises an issue, that gets escalated appropriately with an appropriate response to make sure that an issue doesn't further exacerbate.
And Kelly, what would you say on the benefit side?
I think, one of the things that we talked about during the presentation, and it just really gets this simple: where are your employees? Because especially in this day and age of remote work, we may not always know. Someone might move, they might be working from a beach somewhere and they haven't told anybody. That has implications from a tax perspective, from a withholding perspective, and certainly from a benefits perspective when you find yourself in a state that may have some kind of benefit mandate that you weren't expecting because you didn't even know they were there in the first place. So fundamental, but an important one.
Exactly. So Rich, proactivity, obviously, we just discussed that. How is Jackson Lewis helping employers be proactive?
So Jackson Lewis makes so many attempts of this in so many ways. First, through our client relationships. We try and ensure that every client has a primary contact attorney, and that primary contact attorney, if, for example, they're a litigator, they build someone else into that relationship on an advice and counsel level or a benefits level if it's a regular benefits consult, so that someone doesn't feel that they're talking to a random person all the time. Because this is all about trust, like any other relationship, similar to a marriage. You want to trust who you're talking to. You want to feel comfortable picking up the phone. You want to make sure that that person understands your needs and talks to you in a different way. Let's be honest. Some people like long-winded conversations. Some people like yes or no answers. And that's absolutely vital. Number two, we have developed a tremendous amount of internal resources. Internal resources from different surveys, from handbook policies, from onboarding practices, pretty much any issue that's part of the day-to-day employment life cycle that comes to us, we have an internal expert, we have resources, we have practical experience, and we can respond to a client on a moment's notice. In terms of products, we are beyond excited to talk about Check It via JL, which is something I was intimately involved with, as well as my co-practice group leader, Scott Rygrock, which is taking, honestly, 25, 30 years of survey development and putting that in an online format where now we have 40 surveys, searchable by topic, by state, showing recent updates. That is just a very simple resource for clients to get the initial answer on most day-to-day issues. And we are working on further expansions of that product to get up to 50 surveys by the end of the year. Jackson Lewis also has a separate DLHM product, which is a leave management service, which provides much, much more detailed information on leave of absence compliance so that any employer going into a specific state or dealing with a specific issue can know how to handle it. We honestly feel that we are a national one-stop shop for internal counsel or human resource for any issue that comes up relating day-to-day employment law compliance. We also regularly interact on more granular issues with the benefits practice, with the wage and hour practice, with the disability leave and health management practice to ensure not only that we're giving accurate information, but that we're pointing out the nuances, the arcane issues where it may be necessary to speak to a further expert and to make sure, most importantly, the person that we're speaking to is aware of the issue. To me, having done this for many years now, the most important thing for an internal decision maker to have is knowledge. If they have that knowledge, they know what they're being told, they know what they're not being told, they know what the risk level is, then they can make reasoned decisions, and life is all about making reasoned decisions.
So access, answers, and a good partnership.
And efficiency.
And efficiency. Excellent. Kelly, Rich, thank you so much for sharing your insights today. And I know it's been a long day, but enjoy the rest of the conference, and we'll see you at Workplace Horizons 2026.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Jackson Lewis's podcast, We Get Work. Focused solely on workplace issues, it is our job to help employers develop proactive strategies, strong policies, and business-oriented solutions to cultivate a workforce that is engaged and stable. Please tune into our next program, where we will continue to tell you not only what's legal, but what is effective. We Get Work is available to stream and subscribe on your streaming platform of choice, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. For more information on today's topic, our presenters, and other Jackson Lewis resources, visit jacksonlewis.com. As a reminder, this material is provided for informational purposes only. It is not intended to constitute legal advice, nor does it create a client-lawyer relationship between Jackson Lewis and any recipient.